Karen demanded a VIP table, insisting that she knew the owner. However, as the actual owner, I left her in tears with a $4,000 bill as a result of my revenge. Karen burst into the restaurant, loudly proclaiming that she personally knew the owner and demanding that her group be seated at the VIP table, typically reserved for celebrities. The only issue? I owned the restaurant and had no idea who she was. Amused, I decided to play along and see how the evening unfolded. During dinner, one of her companions asked me whether I thought my life was meaningless because I worked as a waiter. At that moment, I knew the gloves were off, and I was ready to make my move. This event took place around the holiday season, between Christmas and New Year's. My grandparents had immigrated to Canada from Italy in the 1970s and started the restaurant. After their passing, my parents took over and expanded the business over the decades. I've been working here since I was 15, and as my parents aged, they retired and became snowbirds, spending their winters in Florida. A few years ago, they sold the restaurant to me, though they retained a small share of the stock as an additional source of income alongside their savings. Once I became the owner, I modernized and renovated the restaurant, transforming the space completely. I redesigned the logo and reached out to both local and national newspapers to place advertisements. I also invited food critics, bloggers, and vloggers. Initially, the response was slow, and I started to fear that the loan I had taken out for all of this was the worst decision I'd ever made, that I had ruined a family business spanning 3 generations. But soon, things began to turn around. A local semi-popular YouTuber featured us in one of his videos, which led to a surge of visitors and reviews. Even on a typical Monday, we started experiencing 5 to 10 times our usual traffic. The restaurant quickly became a hot spot for large events, and it wasn't uncommon to see celebrities visiting on certain nights. I even extended invitations to high-profile clients to come and cook for our guests, which cost a small fortune but ensured that we were fully booked for the holiday season. People were making reservations as early as July to secure a table for December. It took years of hard work to reach this level of success. Even now, when things get busy, I don't just sit in the back office. I'm actively on the floor. I'm always on the floor, doing whatever needs to be done, whether it's greeting customers, bussing tables, or even mopping the floors. On nights with high-profile guests or special events, I wear a jacket and take charge. One evening, 6 women arrived at the restaurant. 5 of them appeared to be in their early 20s, with the leader seeming to be in her mid-20s. I assumed she was either an older sister or perhaps an older sorority sister to the younger women. As they approached, I was at the entrance to greet them. Queen Bee, Karen was enthusiastically telling the baby Karens how amazing the restaurant was, how fantastic the food would be, and that they might even spot some celebrities. When she reached me, she confidently stated that she needed a table for 6. I politely asked, "Of course. Can I get the name on the reservation?" She looked at me for a moment and then replied, "Oh, I didn't make one, but it's fine. The owner is a personal friend of mine. He always keeps a table or 2 open for special guests, and we'll take one of those tonight." Now, while it's true that many high-profile restaurants, including mine, do keep some tables open for VIPs, I had no idea who this woman was, and we certainly had never discussed any such arrangement. It was clear she was trying to get in without a reservation, but unfortunately for her, she had picked the worst person to try this with. I told her, "I'm sorry, but we cannot seat anyone without a reservation. As you can see, we don't have any available tables." I refrained from telling her that I was the owner and that we had never spoken before. I didn't want to embarrass her in front of her friends, so I decided to handle it politely. She then instructed one of the girls to take a picture of me, loudly declaring that she would speak to the owner and make sure I'd either be scrubbing toilets or fired by the end of the week. The other girls chimed in, saying things like, "Yeah, kiss your minimum wage job goodbye." I couldn't tell if they weren't on her act or if they genuinely believed she knew the owner. Queen Bee Karen continued, "Look, you can either give us a table or I can make your life very difficult. This isn't worth losing your job over." She kept pointing at me, trying to belittle me, and added, "Obviously, you're nobody important here, because if you were, you'd know who I am and never say anything other than yes or of course." Her attempts to put me down were relentless, all in an effort to get that table. By this point, it had been a tough day, and I saw 3 possible options. 1, I could reveal that I was the owner and call her out on everything. Option 2 was to simply give her the table and let it go, but option 3, teaching Queen Bee Karen and her entourage a lesson, was far more appealing. Naturally, I chose option 3. I smiled and said, "Of course, ma'am. Please follow me." I led them to one of the 3 tables we usually reserve for celebrities, which we keep free just in case someone famous drops by. I added, "I apologize for any inconvenience, and you're right. It's much easier to just give you the table." To sweeten the deal, I also told her that the first 3 rounds of drinks would be on the house. Once they were seated, I personally attended to them. As part of our policy, I informed them, "We just need one of your credit cards and IDs to keep on file, and we'll return them to you before you leave." Queen Bee Karen smugly handed me her card and told the others, "Tonight's on me." I took their orders and served their complimentary drinks. Before I left, I informed them that, due to how busy the restaurant was that evening, their meals might be delayed. But the group seemed unconcerned, only focused on enjoying the free drinks. They proceeded to order 3 rounds, still without receiving any food. Eventually, they called me over to check on their meals, all while giving me the coldest attitude. From the moment they arrived, their attitude was condescending. I assured them I'd check on their meals, but also asked if they wanted more drinks. They ordered 2 additional rounds. By the time the appetizers arrived, they were already quite intoxicated, having spent the majority of the evening drinking on an empty stomach and only nibbling on salads. As more food arrived, they continued ordering more beverages. What these women didn't realize was that they were seated at our VIP table, which typically costs several $1,000s just to reserve. I didn't charge them for the table itself, but after the first 3 complimentary rounds, I began charging them for all the premium cocktails they ordered throughout the night. Furthermore, since they were at the VIP table, they were given special menus with no prices listed, an industry secret. These menus also feature higher-end items like white truffle dishes, black caviar meals, and specially imported West Coast oysters. At one point during the night, I began to question whether I was going too far. I considered that they might not fully understand the situation. But then a few things reassured me. One of the baby Karens asked me if I thought my life was meaningless because I was just a server. Additionally, one of my staff overheard them plotting how they could mess with me whenever they wanted, believing that I would always give in to their demands. Here's a more polished version of a text. I overheard them making remarks like, "He's cute, but I'd never date a waiter like that, and he's such a pushover." Comments like this continued throughout the night, so I decided to carry on with their life lesson. By the end of the evening, each of the women had racked up individual bills ranging from $500 to $600. I handed Queen Karen her bill, which totaled $423.23, including tax and tip. I've never seen someone sober up so quickly. She went from smiling and laughing with her friends to looking as though she might cry. She immediately called me over and asked if this was some kind of joke. I took the bill, glanced over it, and apologized, saying, "Let me get you the correct amount." She looked visibly relieved, assuming there had been a mistake and that she'd received someone else's bill. As I walked away, she even called me an effing idiot before turning back to her friends. When I returned with the same bill, she lost her composure again. I calmly asked, "Is there something on the bill you didn't order?" She and the rest of the group were stunned, reviewing every single line of the receipt in disbelief. Several lines on the bill showed that their first 3 rounds of drinks were complimentary. Despite this, they all pulled out their phones and meticulously calculated the total, going over it multiple times. Queen Bee, visibly shaken, muttered, "1 second, I need to use the restroom." A part of me worried that she might try to dine and dash, leaving the baby Karens with the bill. However, I discreetly reminded her that we had her ID and credit card on file, without making it too obvious that I was concerned about her potentially running out of money. About 10 minutes later, she returned with fresh makeup, though it was clear she had been crying. She immediately began complaining about how terrible the food was and how awful the drinks had been, demanding that I at least cut the bill in half. She mentioned that the other girls would help cover the cost, despite having previously insisted that the night was on her. Then, as if a light bulb went off, she brought up her supposed relationship with the owner once again, as though that would convince me to reduce the bill by half. I smiled and simply told her, "No, I can't cut the bill." She then took out her phone and showed me a series of text messages from someone named after my restaurant, followed by the word owner. I immediately realized what she had done. Most likely, she had changed one of her friend's contact names during her trip to the bathroom, erasing previous texts to create this fake conversation. I glanced over the messages and clicked on the contact information, then calmly said, "That's not the owner's number." Her response was, "He has multiple phones for business. Of course, you wouldn't know all his numbers." I replied, "How about this? Let's call him. If he says it's okay to take 50% off the bill, then I'll do it." That's when she began ranting and screaming, which attracted the attention of the few remaining patrons. I knew it was time to end this. In a firmer tone, I said, "Cut the crap, little girl. You don't know the owner. You've never been here before. And if you keep this up, I'll call the police." Her demeanor immediately changed as she tried to defend herself, but I continued. "My grandfather founded this restaurant. My family has been running it for generations. I've worked here nearly my entire life. I am the sole owner of this restaurant, and I've never seen you, heard of you, or made any promises to a stranger I've never met until tonight." The group of girls froze in shock. They had no idea how to respond. Queen Bee was in tears. I added, "Now, I gave you the table you asked for. One of our specially reserved tables for high-end clientele, which I didn't charge you for, along with 3 complimentary rounds of drinks. If you don't pay the bill, I will call the police and hand over your ID." With tears streaming down her face, Karen reluctantly signed the bill. The other girls, visibly shaken, reached into their wallets and handed her whatever cash they could muster, likely a couple of $100, promising to repay her the rest later. 2 days later, an irate man arrived at the restaurant, asking to speak with one of my bartenders. I was in the back office working, so he had to wait about half an hour. She was with him too, head down, avoiding eye contact. When I finally had a moment, I brought them both to my office and showed him highlights from the security footage. Since they had been seated in the VIP area, where we maintain high-quality audio and video for security purposes, the footage was crystal clear. I played the most relevant parts, including their remarks throughout the evening. After everything was said and done, the man rushed out of the restaurant, yelling at her the entire way. I haven't seen or heard from any of them since. The initial bill I presented to them, which did not include the $120 oysters, is now framed on my desk. As a side note, I didn't actually lose as much money on that table and the 3 rounds of drinks as one might expect. The table was intended to remain empty anyway, so I hadn't anticipated any gain from it. The cost of the meal and the additional drinks more than compensated for the initial loss from the complimentary rounds. Now that you know the whole story, am I the jerk? The most astonishing aspect of this situation, aside from the financial aspect and their attempts to secure a table while avoiding the bill, was their perspective on the world. One particular statement from one of the baby Karens stood out. She questioned whether I felt my life was meaningless because I was just a waiter. That has to be one of the most entitled viewpoints we've encountered. It seems that the original poster was considering easing up on his entire plan for retribution until that comment was made. It may not be as dramatic or outrageous as some of the other stories shared here, but the fact that she perceives the world in this manner is troubling. There is absolutely nothing wrong with having a job, regardless of the income it provides. This attitude is unfortunately common for jobs such as janitors, and I find it disheartening when individuals believe they are superior simply because they don't work in those positions. There is absolutely nothing wrong with being a janitor. I struggle to comprehend that mindset, but in this situation, she not only holds that view but also seeks to belittle him for doing a challenging job like waiting tables. At least, that's what she assumes he's doing. On a more positive note, I appreciate that the story concluded on a somewhat gratifying note, with the father trying to rectify the situation but ultimately becoming more frustrated with his daughter than with the restaurant owner. However, I was concerned about the restaurant recording audio from the patrons at that table. I would personally avoid dining at a place where my conversations were being recorded without my consent. I'm glad that everything worked out for the original poster, but I'd like to hear how you would have handled the situation if it were your restaurant, and these were your customers. Was the original poster a jerk or not? And why? Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.